So you finally made up your mind you're going to start reloading. Now you've probably already looked at some stuff and some different equipment that you're going to need, and you've probably already figured out that there is a ton to know about reloading. So in today's introductory video, I'm hoping to answer all of those questions of whether you need a progressive press, a single stage, what's the difference between a 2-die set, a 3-die set, a 4-die set, wet tumbling versus dry tumbling, primer types. I'm going to answer all these questions in today's video in my introduction to reloading. When you're reloading ammunition, there's a series of steps that you're going to do. So here on the screen, I'm going to put what you need to do for straight wall brass, pistol brass that you don't need to trim, and then the steps for brass that you do need to trim. The way that you go about accomplishing these steps depends on the type of equipment that you get. So here's the steps for brass that you don't need to trim. First, you're going to have to clean your brass. Then you're going to have to deprime and size your brass. You're going to have to seat the new primer, expand the case mount so you can actually get the bullet in, fill the case with powder, seat the new bullet, and then optionally you can crimp. So those are the tasks that you're trying to accomplish. So now the rifle brass, there's a few more steps that you're actually going to have to do. You have to, after you clean your brass, you have to lubricate it, and then you have to size it and deprime it, and then you clean the lubricant off the brass, and then you trim, chamfer, deburr, and then you ream out the primer pocket if necessary. Oftentimes rifle brass will have a crimped primer pocket if you're just using factory brass that you picked up off the range. If you buy brass, then oftentimes you don't have to ream out the primer pocket, and it'll come ready to reload. But those are some extra steps. It's a pain because you have to tumble it twice, and trimming is really a pain in the butt. If you ask any reloader, it's probably their least favorite task. Okay, so now we're going to go into the differences of what type of equipment you're going to need to accomplish all of these steps. With a single stage press, you're going to have to do all of these steps differently at a different stage, which is going to require a lot more time. With the progressive press, I'm going to highlight the things that it does all at once, essentially for you. Each time you push that lever down, it'll do all of these steps at once, which in the end saves you so much time. However, you can get a Lee single stage press for like 60, 70, 80 bucks. I have a buddy who found one on sale about 2 years ago. This is 2 years ago. Found it for 30 bucks. Whereas the progressive presses are going to run you quite a bit more. They're going to be like 500, 600, 700 or more, especially right now when things are really difficult to find. Okay, we also have a weird oddball, the turret press. I personally don't think they're worth it. If you're going to spend that kind of money, just spend a hair more and go ahead and get yourself a progressive press. You'll be thanking yourself in the long term. One of the comments in an earlier video I did is that you should probably find the components that you're going to need before you go and start dropping a lot of money on equipment. And right now, I 100% agree, because components are almost impossible to find. Like I mentioned, powder and primers are going to be ridiculously hard to find. Now, that said, you need to know a little bit so you know what you're looking for. As far as primers go, brand honestly doesn't really matter. A lot of reloaders will tell you that they have a preferred brand. For example, mine is CCI, and that's just because I find that it works great in my press. Other people don't like it. I don't like Federal, and that's because it tends to jam a lot in my press. But brand doesn't really matter. As far as the different sizes of primers, there's going to be 4 main sizes: small pistol, large pistol, small rifle, and large rifle. Now, there are other variants of each one of these, like bench rest primers and magnum primers. That doesn't really matter too much. At the end of the day, you're going to be working up your load no matter what you get. But those are the 4 main types that you're looking for. Now, if you're looking to reload 9mm 223, you're looking for small pistol primers and small rifle primers, respectively, both of which are extremely hard to find. Okay, another thing that you're going to have to do, and one of the very first things, is you're going to have to clean your brass. Now, they call it tumbling in the reloading world because you just tumble it around over and over. Now, there's 2 different ways that you can tumble your brass. The first is dry tumbling, and the second is wet tumbling. Now, dry tumbling, you'll tell them to put it in a vibrator tumbler with some sort of media, like a corn media or a walnut media. And wet tumbling is what I do. So this is the Frankfurt Arsenal rotary tumbler, or the FART, and you fill it full of water, and then the stainless steel media, which is what makes it all shiny, and that is what cleans your brass. As far as the difference between wet tumbling and dry tumbling, honestly, it doesn't really matter. It's really up to you. I have an uncle who has reloaded tens of thousands of rounds, and he swears by dry tumbling. I personally like wet tumbling, and the biggest reason is because my rounds, my cases come out perfectly shiny. They come out way shinier than if you do dry tumbling, but at the end of the day, they both clean your case plenty well. Okay, the next question that I'm going to answer are about die sets. So with dies, you can see I'm using the Lee dies. All of them are the 4 die sets. With dies, on that list of things that we needed to accomplish, I'll throw it up again here. We have to deprime and size. We have to expand the mouth. We have to seat the bullet, and then we have to crimp the bullet. Now, all these things you got to do. Now, with rifle brass, you actually don't have to typically expand the mouth on pretty much every rifle brass, including 223, so you don't need an expander die. Also, factory crimping is also not necessary. You don't have to factory crimp or crimp your bullets. I tend to like to because it tends to make that so your bullets are more stable. You can just pitch them in the back of your truck. You don't have to worry about bullets getting seated in too far. It makes them last a little bit longer. The environment's not going to be able to get down there as much. It's going to make them more waterproof. Granted, I don't recommend ever chucking your rounds into water anyway. So that's what a crimper die does. I highly recommend it, but it's, again, not necessary. As far as powders go, there's 2 categories: pistol powder and rifle powder. Now there's more powders like for shotguns and stuff like that, but I'm not focusing on that in this video. So pistol powder, essentially, it burns much faster than rifle powder, and that's because it's got to accelerate that bullet down a tiny little bitty barrel. Rifle powder burns a lot slower. That said, you cannot use pistol powder in a rifle unless you're trying to blow up your gun, and if you use rifle powder in a pistol, your performance will be absolutely awful, and I highly don't recommend that you do that. Get the right powder for the right job. As far as the quantity of powder that you use, you're going to want to get yourself a good reloading manual. If you're cheating and you're really cheap, you can actually go to the store and look in their reloading manual and look and see kind of what you need. Another great website that I'll put in the description below is Hodgkin's website. You can put the bullet weight, the cartridge, the powder you're using, the manufacturer of the powder, and it will give you a couple of recommended loads. Now, at the end of the day, every load that you're going to do, you're going to want to work up, which means you put a small amount of powder in, and then you slowly work up the amount of powder that you put in, and you start shooting the lower ones, and you check for overpressure signs as you go. Some different overpressure signs as you're checking are going to be, I'll do a more extensive video on that later, but if your primer is bulging out, if your primer looks like it's really smashed back, if your case is starting to get really deformed, struggling to extract, that's another sign of overpressures. Any of those, and you want to make sure that you're backing off on your powder charges. I'm sure in my videos you've seen this wonderful case called bullet water, and that's because my wife had this bottle full of just regular water that she would use to spray stuff, and I needed a bottle for my bullet lubricant, well, actually my case lubricant, and so I stole it and I wrote bullet, and it says water underneath. You can tell that the bullet is not nearly as pretty handwriting as my wife's, so that's because I wrote it. Anyway, this is when you go to size and punch out the primers of your rifle brass. If you put it into the die without some sort of lubricant, you're going to hate life, and it's going to get stuck in there hard, and then you're going to spend some quality time with a vise getting that brass out. Case trimming. What cases do you need to trim? What cases don't you need to trim? Essentially, you're going to have to trim necked rifle brass. That's a general rule of thumb. There's other cases that you have to trim, but just to get started, we'll start from there. So pistol brass, straight wall pistol brass, like your 9mm, you're not going to have to trim that. But your 223, you're going to have to trim that because it will slowly get longer and longer, and it won't seat correctly in the barrel. Now, there's a lot of different ways to trim it. There's cheap ways to trim it. You can go get a Lee trimmer that I'll put a link in the description below, and that's real cheap, but it'll take you a lot of time. One of the fastest ways to trim is to get this is the world's finest trimmer, and then their second version of this, so I can have different inserts. And essentially, you'll just put this in a drill. It has to be a 1/2-inch drill, and then it'll just spin and it'll measure it off of the neck. of the brass, and so that's one of the fastest ways. Now after that, you'll have to, it leaves kind of rough, so you have to clean it off. So you have to chamfer and deburr the brass. So that's what this is for. This is about $50. So I'll put this in my drill right here. I'll put this right next to it, all going at once. And then right next to this, I'll actually have my impact driver with a Phillips head, and that's to remount the primer pocket. So on rifle brass, particularly 223, you have to remount the primer pocket. So you can see here, if I can get it to focus, you can't really see it, but the primers are crimped in, so it's ridiculously hard to get another primer in there if you don't ream it out. So to remount the primer pocket, you can't really see it on these rounds very well just because my camera isn't focusing, but they crimp the primers in, which makes it ridiculously hard to put in the next primers here. So what I use is I just use a Phillips head in my impact driver, and I put it right here next to my drill with my trimmer and then my chamfer deburr tool, and then I'll flip it around and ream it out, and that allows me to go really quickly. Okay, a couple of other steps that you're going to need to do if you get a single stage, and I covered this a little bit before. You're going to need something to charge the case with powder. Progressives will do this for you, and you'll also need something to stick in primers. Progressive presses, again, will do this for you. There's tools that you can get if you have a single stage, but if you have a progressive press, it'll take care of it for you. So that is pretty much it. Now every press and such, they'll have their own set of things that will make your life easier. For example, on the Hornady press, there are these lock and load bushings that goes on the die. You'll see these ones have them on them already, but I have some in here that don't have them on, and that just makes it so you can swap out your dies way fast, and they're perfectly aligned. Other like RCBS and Dillon's, they have similar concepts to this. One of them has a whole thing that you slide the whole thing out, and then you put a whole nother thing in with all your different dies for each different caliber. So it makes your life a lot easier to switch between dies. Another thing you'll need are shell plates. Each different manufacturer will have a different shell plate. If you have a single stage press, it's kind of nice because it includes a shell plate. Free shell holders right there. And that's what this guy is right here, and that'll go into your press, and then you don't need to buy a shell plate. So if you go with a single stage, you'll just save even a little bit more money right there, because a shell plate, these things will typically run you anywhere from $40 to $60. Right now, a 9mm one on eBay, they're really hard to find, and they're going for like $140 or $130, which is absolutely ridiculous, which is what this one happens to be. A couple other little tools that you'll need. You're going to need a scale, and this is to measure your powder. And then you're going to need something to pull bullets. There's a couple different types of bullet pullers. There's a collet puller, which will essentially grab onto the bullet, and this is a second bullet, so you can kind of see that it's not perfect. It's been pulled by a collet puller. This one is a pretty much a hammer puller, and it just uses the weight of the bullet. Just bang it really hard, and the bullet will come out. If you do decide to wet tumble, you really want something like this. This is just a magnet, so it grabs the tumbling media, and then you pull up on this and it'll let it go. You will need one of these unless you want to hate your life trying to separate your media from your brass if you decide to wet tumble. If you decide to dry tumble, then you obviously don't need it. This has nothing to do with actually reloading. This is for casting bullets, so forget about it. If you have a progressive press, or you'll need one of these. This is a primer flipper, so it orients all your primers in the right direction, and so that way you can pick them up all in a tube and stick them in this primer tube here. So holy crap, there's so much to know about reloading. If you made it this far in the video, then you're probably overwhelmed because that was a fire hose. Rewatch it. I'm going to do a quick summary right here. So I'm going to throw up the screen if you get a progressive press of the different things that you need. Now remember, each brand, Lee shell plate won't fit on a Hornady press, and vice versa, or RCBS or Dillon or whatever. Now I recommend, if you're going to spend money on a turret press, just go a little bit more and get the progressive press. Now here's the stuff for a single stage press. If you have loads of time to burn or you're on a really tight budget, then go ahead and go this route, but it will take you more time. So that is pretty much it. I don't have anything else. Please post in the comments below what questions you still have about reloading, so I can go ahead and answer those. Or if you're already into reloading and you have some of your own methods that you've worked up to make your life easier, please put those in the comments below as well. I'm sure myself and everybody else would love to see what you do.